Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here, and today we're going to be ranking most of 60s Doctor Who, because I haven't quite seen all of 60s Doctor Who yet, but I have seen most of it, and I will be ranking the 60s stories that I've seen from worst to best. I will real quick talk about the 6 or 7 stories that won't be on the list, so that way you won't be watching for them. Now, the stories from classic Doctor Who I have never seen and won't be on this list are Marco Polo, though I have seen the 30-minute cut down on it that's on the beginning box set, but since it's not the full thing, I'm not counting it. Dalek's Master Plan, I'm saving that one for a rainy day or two. The Massacre, really don't want to try to get through that recon. The Smugglers, though I have read the novelization, I have read the novelization of The Smugglers and really enjoyed it, but I still don't quite count it. I'm holding out for an animation that may be coming for that one. The Savages, and The Wheel in Space, and possibly The Underwater Menace. I suspect this will not be airing until early in January, which by that time I will have seen The Underwater Menace. So whenever that happens, I may just slot The Underwater Menace into this list somewhere during the editing process. So The Underwater Menace may be on here, it may not. So we have 43 or 44, depending on if Underwater Menace makes it in. I think it will, so let's just start at 44. Stories to look at out of the 50 stories from the 60s. And we're going to start at the bottom with my least favorite Doctor Who story from the 60s. And it's the Gunfighters. Some of you may have seen this coming. I am not a big fan of the Gunfighters. It's not all bad. I like the guy playing Doc Holliday a lot. I like the fact Dodo actually has some stuff to do. And some of the sets look pretty nice. The American accents are a bit problematic. I am an American, and some of you British people know how it is when you hear non-British people trying to do British accents. So there's some of that going on. The guy playing Johnny Ringo is also good. Steven, I don't like how Steven is portrayed and written in this episode. It's not Peter's fault. It's just he's not given much to work with there. The idea of the Doctor going to Doc Holliday because of his tooth being hurt is kind of laughably silly, but it works for a 60s kids show. And it's a great historical lesson about the shootout at the OK Corral. And of course it has the song. You guys know how I am about the song, The Ballad of Johnny Ringo. I wouldn't mind the song if they didn't play it every 4 seconds. Because I've only watched it once, but my memory is, it seems like every 4 seconds. I need a special edition of the Gunfighters where the only updated effects are they don't have that song in it, or they only have it in it once. I'll give it once. Other than that, don't want it. And that would be a much better edition of it. It's hard. I'm not saying it's unwatchable. I am saying it's hard for me personally to watch. Maybe I need to give it another chance, give it a second watch. It's certainly better than a lot of the stuff Modern Who puts out. You know, Give It to Me over Kill the Moon, or In the Forest of the Night, or Oxygen any day of the week. But it's my least favorite of 60s Who. Next on the list is the Mythmakers. I think this one is mostly just down to it being completely missing. The recon is hard to get through. I've read the novelization of it. I prefer the novelization of it, and the novelization is actually a bit different since it's told from the point of view of Homer, which I like. I like Odysseus in it. Most of the cast I actually like in it. I don't like some of the weird incidental music, especially in that first episode. Some of you may remember my review of it when I talk about the incidental music in it and my reaction to it. That really put me off. It's right at the beginning of the episode of part 1, and I was going, ooh, this is going to be a rough one. I enjoyed the story well enough, but it's really hard to get through that recon, and that is the main reason it ranks this low. Plus, I'm not a big fan of Vicky's departure, to be honest, and neither was Maureen for that matter. Next on the list is The Chase. The Chase I have talked about before. It has a really good first story, a really good final story, a really good first episode, a really good final episode. It has, I like part of episode 3, like the bit when Peter Purvis up on the rooftop, the Empire State Building, is good. But then I didn't care for episode 2. The stuff on the Mary Celeste is also terrible in episode 4 and episode 3. Episode 4 is straight out garbage. And episode 5 is just, I don't get into this one. It's another one of those times where my opinions of the episodes vary drastically within the story. The same problem I have with Greatest Show in the Galaxy. So the first and last episodes really do help it, but most of what's in the middle I don't care for. It will be very hard for me to go back and rewatch all of The Chase. I think next time I will just watch like the first episode, the third episode, first half of the third episode, the fifth episode, and the sixth episode. And that's probably all I'll do, because the rest of it's just mush. Next on the list is the Web Planet. Now, the Web Planet, I will always give points for its ambition. Always. I will always respect the ambition of the Web Planet. They had some big ideas, and my goodness, they tried. They really did. And sometimes it's effective. I think the Zarbi outfits look nice. I think the Menoptera outfits look nice. Again, for a 60s kid show, some of the sets work. Like when they're running around on the little moon or planet surface, some of those shots are impressive. Unfortunately, some of those shots have Vaseline smeared all over the camera, and that ruins it. It's supposed to give it this otherworldly look, fails utterly. There's even a spot where we have a Zarbi hit a camera, which is funny. The Grub people I don't care for. Their design is also terrible, but just them being there I don't care for, which was a choice of the director, not the writer, and it was a bad choice. Some of the sets also look bad, and the final confrontation with the spider-like creature is not pulled off very effectively at all, and at 6 parts it drags. This would have made a much better 4-parter. If this was a 4-parter, I'd be a lot more forgiving, but as a 6-parter, this is the one that needs to be edited down and done in color. Because there's some good ideas there. Edit this one down to like a 60 or 75 minute episode and do it in color, and I'll be a little more willing to rewatch it. Next on the list, making the first appearance of the second Doctor, is the Space Pirates, and it's this low due to the reconstruction being so hard to get through. I have read the novelization of the Space Pirates, and it's a good read. I actually enjoyed the story. I liked the novelization a lot. The Space Pirates, I think its reputation is oftentimes derived from it being almost completely missing, not a lot happening in the surviving episode 2, and the recon being so bad because there's no telesnaps, because John Cura was in very bad health at this time, and I believe passed away shortly after. He stopped doing telesnaps during the mine robber. No telesnaps for this. So Loose Cannon had a heck of a time doing a recon for this story, and it's a lot of the same pictures being used over and 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 over again. And it progressively gets harder to get through, to where by the time I finished it, it was a chore for a story I'd already read and liked. Also, the guy who plays Chansey, or whatever his name is, I think he's trying to do a Jimmy Stewart impersonation. Well, I want you to meet my friend Harvey. It's just which is a little hard. He's a character you either really like or really don't. I like him because he amuses me. And I actually do enjoy the story and some of the effects, although not having stars in the space shots really does bother me. But other than that, it's just the recon is so hard to get through, why it's ranked this low. Next on the list is the Celestial Toy Maker, and again, this one suffers from being mostly missing. The surviving episode 4 is really good. I technically read the novelization as well, but that was long ago to where it's really faint in my memory. And again, this is a situation where there's not really a lot of telesnaps, because I believe this is one of the one produced under John Wiles, or whatever his name was, who did not hire John Cura to do telesnaps, which is why the Wiles era, or Wilkes, or whatever his name was, a lot of telesnaps don't exist for those. That's the reason why the Massacre is in such rough shape as well. So episodes 1, 2, and 3 really had to be cobbled together, and the telesnaps had to basically be created for the loose cannon recons. And you can get through them, but it's a little tough. The surviving episode 4 is actually really good, and you guys know one of the things I'm a big fan of is if a final episode survives. That's a big difference for me. So the fact I was able to finish the story on a high note does help it a lot for me. I think Michael Goff is putting in a fantastic performance. I enjoy the minimalist approach this story takes, that, much like The Mind Robber, actually, that lends itself to classic Doctor Who's look, feel, and most definitely budget very well with the minimalist, simplistic take they take on this kind of fantasy realm they're in. Again, much like The Mind Robber, and it really works for the confines of the budget that Doctor Who had to work with at the time. And I really think this one would be a lot higher if the story was intact, or at least mostly intact. Next on the list is the Ice Warriors. The Ice Warriors is a bit dull for me. It plods along. It's a 6-parter that would have worked better as a 4-parter. The animations for episode 2 and 3 are fine. They're not bad. They're fine. I enjoyed them well enough, except for the animation of the Ice Warriors. The way their mouths move, something about that's a little off. They look more like puppets or cardboard cutouts sometimes, but I think the actual human actors are done really well. I like the one actor playing the guy who really overly relies on the computer. I don't know why, because he kind of freaks out a lot, but I think the actor playing him is so good, it really helps the story for me. The rest of the guest cast are kind of hit or miss for me. The set design's kind of meh for me. Troughton's putting in a good performance, as is Victoria and Frasier. But Victoria as a character I find really irksome in this episode. She's panicking, she's screaming. This is an episode that really makes me dislike Victoria. She just feels useless in it. And it, again, at 6 parts, it just drags for me. If it was 4 parts, I would like the Ice Warriors a lot more. Next on the list is Fury from the Deep. Now, Fury from the Deep is a story I like. Like, I actually really enjoy the story of Fury a lot. But the animation is absolute garbage. Like, absolute garbage. I just... It's my least favorite animation. You guys have heard me talk about that before. Aside from the Web of Fear episode 3 animation. That's another story. But I never got into the kind of Scooby-Doo cartoon look of it. And you can tell, especially in hindsight, that the production was rushed, because the animation for Galaxy 4 and Abominable Snowmen, which were made by the same team, is so much better. So much better. But I have a lot of issues with the animation and some of the creative choices made in the animations, like expanding a lot of the living areas to where they're bigger. It takes away from the claustrophobic nature of the story, because Fury from the Deep has a very, I think, is supposed to have a very atmospheric feel, a very closed-in feel, a very Base Under Siege Season 5 feel of being very claustrophobic and in tight spaces where things can reach down and grab you. And I feel like the animation misses that completely. I think I actually prefer watching the recon, the 6-part recon, over the animation, but the story itself is so good. And I really wish at least 1 or 2 episodes of this story existed, because just from the brief footage we have, it looks so creepy, so make the children behind the sofa, that I wish I could see in a fully intact episode of this story. And if this story was complete, it would be so much higher on this list, I just know. Next on the list is the Dominators. The Dominators is higher than some of the others for being complete. We have so few complete Troughtons, with only 7 complete Troughton stories. The Dominators is this low on the list because it's not very good, let's be honest. I have to remind myself that the Dominators is 5 parts. Sometimes I tend to think it's 4 parts or 6 parts because there's just not a lot of 5-parters out there. But it's 5 parts. It's too long. It is not very interesting. I always wondered before I watched the Dominators if it was going to be one that I thought was underrated, like the Crotons. And then I got to the part right at the beginning when the 2 Dominators are talking to each other like this and not looking at each other. And I was over there going, ooh, ooh. This one's going to be very hard to get through, isn't it? This one's going to be hard to get through. I just know. And it didn't get a lot better. Now, I love the satire it's basically making of the dangers of being a completely pacifist society, to where, you know, they could be beaten so easily because they're so used to being a pacifist society that warmongers could come in and take them over. Family Guy did an episode on that really well, as well, did a really good episode about that. I think the acting is neat. I think the scene when the Dominators kill the people at the beginning and the one girl's face, just some of the effects in it are pulled off well. The Quarks are, once again, and they try to do this a lot in the 60s, they try to find the next thing to replace the Daleks. They try to find the next Daleks, and it never works. The Mechanoids, the Quarks, the Crotons, and the Quarks just look silly. What does make this episode work is Troughton. Frasier and Wendy as well, but Troughton sells this story. He is so good in it. The bit with the Dominators, when the one Dominator's like, I thought I told you to stay away from the Quarks. And he's like, well, I do. Whenever I see one, I run away, but they're everywhere. So what am I supposed to do? I just love how Troughton just immediately says that. And he's lying through his teeth. Rule 1, the doctor lies. Troughton lies. The second doctor lies. But he does it so well. Troughton is such a joy to watch in this episode. And that, the story being complete and Troughton being so good, is what makes it rank at least this high. And next on the list is the Seeds of Death. Seeds of Death is definitely an improvement over the Ice Wars. It still feels a little too long for me. It still drags a little bit. But I enjoyed the guest cast. I like the Ice Warriors in it. I still like the effect when the Ice Warriors shoot people. You know, I like the one kind of courageous guy who manages to trick one into the room before, of course, he ends up getting killed too. Even the kind of cowardly guy who in the end still does the right thing. But you feel bad for him because the guy is just trying really hard not to die. And then you have a couple good cliffhangers too, like with the Doctor and the Rocket. Again, that was a little hazy in my mind because I'm not the biggest fan of it, so I don't really go back to it a lot. I think I've only watched it all the way through twice. But still a good story, and again, one of those rare, complete Troughton stories. You've got to appreciate it for that. Next on the list is the Censorites. Now, I enjoyed the Censorites on my first watch through. I don't know how it'll hold up on rewatch. I could see where people would find it a little long-winded. It did have that first watch through effect of wondering what's going to happen next to keep me going through it that first time. The Censorite makeup design is fine. I like the kind of inner squabble going on between the Censorite hierarchy. I like that little B plot going on there, which is actually really just a strong part of the A plot. Susan gets a little more to do, at least for a little bit, which I like. She seems kind of actually important in parts. I like how the first couple parts take place on the ship, with the rest of the part taking part on the planet. Again, having only watched it once, it is one of those that kind of fades from the memory, kind of the terminus effect, as I call it. But I remember liking it, I think, more than its reputation. Next on the list is the Edge of Destruction. I am not a big fan of the Edge of Destruction, but I love its ending. Its ending does save it. It sticks the landing perfectly. Even at 2 parts, it feels too long. I mean, I understand why it's all shot in the TARDIS and why it's only 2 episodes. I know all the behind the scenes on that. But just, I don't overly get into that one. It's so weird. The characters feel so off in that story to me. I mean, I'm sure they're still finding their footing. Even the Doctor, of course. Again, early days for the Doctor as well. It's just the ending I love so much. It's really the first time you see the Doctor really soften, the first time he really treats Barbara and Ian as people instead of just as nuisances. And I really like that. That's actually a really good ending, which does save the story for me. Next on the list is the Crusade. I like the Crusade. The Crusade, if it was complete, would be so much higher on this list. I absolutely love Jean Marsh in this. I absolutely love Julian Glover in this. They are both fantastic. I think our main TARDIS team is doing a good job in it. I enjoy the set design in it a lot. It's a fun adventure. I love the fact that Richard and the other guy, the guy Richard is fighting, I don't know his name. I like the fact that they don't portray them as black and white, as Richard's the good guy and the other guy is the evil foreign guy. They don't do that. It's very nuanced, especially for, 1964, 65, whenever the story came out, that they're both portrayed as good people, people who are trying to do the right thing. People are looking for ways to avoid war. They're both played really well. I know the other guy is, of course, played by a white actor in brown face or yellow face or whatever you want to call it, Oriental looks, which, of course, would be frowned upon today. But the actual character he's playing is written well and performed well by the actor, to where he's not just portrayed as this stereotypical bad guy. He's actually portrayed in a pretty good light. And I think that's actually very progressive, especially for the time. The two missing episodes, it's just a shame. The recon on the Season 2 box set is a nice recon. You really need to watch it with the subtitles on, though. Like, especially episode 4, I was getting lost. I had to go back and start over with the subtitles on, because there is a lot happening. But if this story was complete, it would be really high up there. It is a good story. Next on the list is The Underwater Menace, which I have seen. Haha. I enjoyed this one. Now, I've only watched the 2 surviving episodes with the black and white animation. I haven't watched the color animation. Don't know if I will. Actually, I don't see the point in watching a story completely animated when half of it actually exists. That seems just an odd decision for me. So, I liked the story itself. The great thing about Underwater Menace is I knew going in, it's not exactly Essential Doctor Who. I know it's not exactly Genesis of the Daleks or City of Death or Caves of Androzani or Inferno or anything like that. So I went into it with, expectations not through the roof, so to speak. And I enjoy it for what it is. I think it's a lot of fun. I think Troughton is putting in an amazing performance. I like the guy playing Zorloff or whatever his name is. I think Ben and Polly and Jamie are working well together. I like the animation. The black and white animation looks really good. I love how fluid the movement is. Not quite up to Macroterra's level, but close. Better than a lot of the other animations. The characters move very lifelike. I enjoyed that. And I didn't find switching from animation to live action very jarring. Some people seem to think it would be. I didn't. I was just fine going from animated episode 1 to surviving 2 and 3 to episode 4 being animated just fine. And again, I found the story enjoyable enough. I liked it, especially going in with lower expectations to begin with. I found it very enjoyable. So I don't really have too many problems with this one. I actually think it is better than its reputation, especially now that we can see episodes 1 and 4 in like a much better visual medium than just watching that DVD Telesnap recon. So I enjoy it. Underrated story. Next on the list is the Highlanders. Part of the reason this one ranks slightly higher is I love the novelization. I have read the Target novelization. I have the novelization of the Crusade as well, but I think since I got the novelization for Crusade just after I watched it, I just wasn't in the mood. I've literally opened the book to start it 3 times, and I've never gotten past the first page. I think because it was so soon after I'd read the book, but I am going to get to that one eventually. But I loved the novelization of the Highlanders, which I read first. I read the novelization of the Highlanders, then went back and watched the 4-episode recon. And the 4-episode recon is a little hard to get. It's not really that hard to get through. It's definitely not the worst. It's way easier to get through than, say, the Space Pirates or the Myth Makers. And maybe it's because since I had read the novelization, I already had kind of a movie in my mind of how events played out, and it was just syncing that up with what was going on screen. Plus, I just like the Highlanders. It introduces Jamie. I love Jamie, and Troughton's just hilarious in it. I love Troughton in it. And I actually like Polly in this one a lot, too, and the little Scottish girl that's with Polly, and she kind of picks up on some independence from Polly. I absolutely love them. They're a great little dynamic duo. I love that. The Highlanders it's a fun story. It's actually a really fun story. I really wish at least one episode of it would turn up, because I would love to watch it. Next on the list is the Aztecs. I always find the Aztecs to be a bit overrated. It's good. Make no bones about it, the Aztecs is great. Jacqueline Hill gets to put on such a good performance as Barbara. Barbara is written so well in this episode. You have some humorous stuff going on with the Doctor, with him accidentally getting engaged. Ian gets to have a couple of nice fight scenes. The guy playing the sacrifice guy, who also plays Ash in Colony in Space, he's really good. I like him in this a lot. And the Doctor and Barbara have their wonderful scene together when he talks about how you can't alter history. You can't change history, not one line. I love that. That's easily my favorite part of the whole episode, and the scene that got me interested in seeing the episode. This was actually, I think, one of the earliest pieces of fan mail I ever got. I think Stevel might have seen it. It was probably either Robin or Stevel who sent the Aztecs to me. It was one of the early ones I got, and it was a good watch. I love the set design in this one a lot too. It has some really, really good set design. It just doesn't quite rank as high to me as stuff like, say, Reign of Terror. I don't know why. As good as it is, it just doesn't stick out to me as much as a lot of the other historicals in this era that I like more for other reasons, which we'll talk about. Next on the list is the 10th Planet, and some of that is probably for its historical significance, with, of course, being the First Regeneration story, Hartnell's final story, the Cybermen's first story, and is one of the most iconic Cybermen looks. I love the Mondasian Cybermen in the story. I love their design. The Cybermen have never looked creepier. I mean, it's not exactly David Cronenberg body horror, but it's still some good body horror. It's, BBC 60's body horror. The first two episodes of it are brilliant. I love the first two episodes of 10th Planet. It's the second half where it falls apart. Hartnell not being there in episode 3 hurts it. It's not their fault. He was ill. What can you do? But it still hurts it. It's still rough with him not being there, especially with us not having episode 4 existing, and that being the final surviving episode of his run. Him not being there really hurts the story. And then, of course, episode 4 missing really hurts. Now, the animation by Planet 55 is very good. I tend to love Planet 55's animations. All three of them, I think they're great. This one is also really good. It uses some camera angles that are a little weird, and it's a little jarring going from the 3 surviving episodes to the animation. It really is a little jarring. I have also watched the old VHS recon of it as well, which is fine. But I like the animation itself, the style. I love that Planet 55 style that they used, even if the camera angles are odd choices. It kind of disappoints there, because I tend to love when a final episode exists in missing stories. That's a big deal for me. Like, I'm looking forward to Wheel in Space because the final episode of it exists. So having something where the first 3 exist and the last is animation, it stumbles on the landing for me just a bit, and that's why it has to rank here. Next on the list is Galaxy 4. I actually really enjoy Galaxy 4. I talked about Galaxy 4 recently when I was doing my discussion about the Davros problem and how a lot of what Russell was pointing out as problematic, people were fighting against those tropes even in the 60s. 1965, when Galaxy 4 came out, it was the season opener for season 3, and it's a wonderful story, especially teaching an important lesson for children, which is very much was a kid's show at the time, about not judging a book by its cover. and with, of course, you being presented two races, one being these attractive, gorgeous blondes, and the other being these kind of repulsive, repugnant-looking reals. And one of them is good and one of them is evil, and of course it's the attractive blondes that are evil, or bad, and selfish, whereas the reals were the benign, benevolent people. And that's an important lesson for young people to learn. So Doctor Who knew this in 1965, even though it struggles with it in 2023. And was actively teaching children that lesson in 1965. And I think it's a good story. I think the animation is really good. It's a huge improvement over their previous effort, which was Fury from the Deep, which I suspect Fury from the Deep suffered from, again, time constraints and budget constraints, where Galaxy 4 flows better. I love the color choices they made for the colorization. It does kind of have that Technicolor 60s Trek look, which I like. I love the orange sky. The colors really pop on it. The black and white version of the animation is also good. The surviving episode Airlock is nice. And the clip from episode 1 that's about 6 minutes long is nice. And then the Recon's good. The Recon's probably my favorite way to watch it, actually. I really enjoy the Recon. If you're trying to switch between animation and live action, it's a little jarring because some things are changed, like the encampment at the real ship, because they're never in the real ship. Reals, not R-E-A-L, R-I-L-L. The actual race, the Reals. They're never actually in their ship. They're in the encampment outside the ship. The animation, the way that it reimagines that encampment, makes it look more like you're in the ship, where the original surviving footage we see in episode 3 shows them more of a, kind of a makeshift tent-like thing they have up, which works way better for me. So trying to watch the animations for 1, 2, and 4 with the live action 3 does jar very badly. So if you're going to watch the animation, you should just watch it all animated. If you're going to watch surviving episodes and surviving footage, watch the Recons, what I would recommend. But I enjoy the story a lot. I actually think it's a really good story. Plus that very opening shot of the story, which still exists, where it centers on the console and pans down, is a wonderful, wonderful little technical shot, especially for 60s Doctor Who. And it's a shame the animation didn't keep that. Next on the list is The Faceless Ones. The Faceless Ones has grown on me. First time I watched it, I was very meh about it. I like it well enough now. I don't think it's essential Doctor Who, and I'm kind of surprised I have it ranked this high, actually, looking at it now. But I enjoy The Faceless Ones. I think it fills out its 6 parts fair enough. It could have been a little shorter. Sometimes I think it needs to be shorter. Sometimes I think it fills that out good enough. I think the animation marries with the surviving episodes really well. That way, the only times I think liberties are taken on the animations are later in the story, when you're at areas that aren't in the surviving episodes, like when they're up on the changeling spaceships. That works better. I enjoy that. Some of the character likenesses don't quite work for me for the guest actors. Troughton's face is also a little off, but it's just a little. It's not bad. Jamie's face is a little off, but it's not bad. I think Polly and Ben look good. But some of the guest cast, like the female stewardess, her face doesn't look right to me compared to the surviving footage. I do think the other actress who's kind of a companion, this one, the same woman who played in Queen Victoria in Tooth and Claw, I think her animation works pretty well, even if they do draw her dress with dots instead of the little leaf clovers like in the actual surviving episode. But my biggest problem with the animation is that the faceless ones, when they're in their natural form, don't look right. They still look like they kind of have a face instead of looking like they were supposed to look in the original production, which pictures of survive. And I really wish they'd gone more for that neutral blank face look. I think that would have worked a lot better. But other than that, it's enjoyable. It's, again, maybe a tad too long, maybe not. It depends on the day, but it's enjoyable well enough. Next on the list is Enemy of the World, which, again, I wonder why I have it this high, because I'm not a huge Enemy of the World fan. I think a lot of it is down to Troughton's performance. I think Troughton is putting in a good performance. He's basically playing 4 characters, because he's playing the Doctor, he's playing Salamander, he's playing the Doctor pretending to be Salamander, which is different, and he's playing Salamander pretending to be the Doctor briefly. Again, different, because he's such a good actor, Troughton. The bit with the volcanoes and how Salamander is tricking people is really, really good. I like the guy who plays the cook. I think he's only in one episode, but I remember really liking him. And I like the bit when Salamander does it. I'll give you one chance. I said one chance. I love the way Troughton plays him in that. It's really good. Again, one of the few surviving Troughton stories, one of the ones we got back a few years ago, around 2013, thankfully. And of course, one of only 2 complete Troughton stories from season 5, with the other being Tomb. It's a good watch. I don't quite get into it as much as some people do. I think the ending is a little rushed, to be honest, and I think it's a little overly long, but I think it's a good story. And again, being one of the few surviving Troughtons, it is one you can steer people toward who might not be familiar with 60s Doctor Who, to let them kind of start with. Next on the list is The War Machines. This is a good one. I've only watched it the one time, but I liked it. Now, the actual War Machines themselves look a little... Let's not kid ourselves. But the idea of Wotan is a cool idea. I don't think it had quite become so tropey at the time. The fact it can control people and mimic them is really cool. The effect of when it does it's really good. Dodo's exit is terrible, but I like Polly and Ben's introduction. This is actually Polly and Ben's only complete story, actually, believe it or not. And Hartnell has some really good moments in this, especially I think it's that cliffhanger when he's facing down the War Machine. I think that's a really good moment. So I like it. I need to give it another watch through again, though. Next to the list is Mission to the Unknown. Now, I have seen the college remake of this, and I have seen Ian Levine's animation. I enjoyed both. I think they're both really good. I like the little cactus things, the Vardens or whatever they're called. I can't remember. I think it's something begins with a V. I like them. I like the concept of them. How they basically turn you into one of them. That's basically, I'm guessing, how they reproduce. They turn other things into them. That's creepy. It's done really well in the remake, and it's done really well in the animation. It's a nice sneak peek into Dalek's master plan, I think. I think it's neat to have an episode as kind of a teaser of what's going on and what to expect. I like the fact that it's still got Mythmakers going on in between it. That's pretty cool. And the fact that the people who are fighting in this episode don't make it. I mean, they all die. They fail in their mission. I think that's pretty neat. You actually have a chance where you kind of see the Daleks win. I love when the Daleks get to win. It's not often. So I enjoy that. I think it's creepy. I think it's neat. And since it doesn't involve any of the main cast, I think there's so many things you could do with this. And I'd love to see an episode of modern Doctor Who kind of do something with this. A Dr. Light episode where almost everybody dies and the Doctor doesn't show up to the very end, just to kind of basically find a room full of corpses. And then the next episode is him dealing with it with maybe a few people who are left. I would love to watch that. There's so many things you could take Mission to the Unknown, the idea of it, and run with it in modern Who that I would love to see. Next on the list is the Space Museum. I actually enjoy all of the Space Museum. Now, episode 1 is clearly the highlight. There are a lot of high concepts, neat ideas, and a lot of what the heck is going on in episode 1. Episode 1 is Doctor Who being Doctor Who, making you wonder what's going on, taking its sci-fi premise and just running with it. It's really, really good. And a lot of people will argue that it just turns into meh after that. I disagree. Episodes 2 through 6 are still good, but it does change into a more just kind of generic Doctor Who story of, fighting people one side, fighting the other, and the Doctor has to win and then get out of there. They're still fine. I think the rest of the story is fine. Is it anything stellar to write home about? No. Episode 1 does the heavy lifting. It is carrying the story on its back and with both of its arms. It's very much the Arnold Schwarzenegger of the story. It really is. But the other 5 episodes are fine. It's still a good story overall. I like it. I don't just think that it's one good episode and then 5 bad episodes, or even just meh episodes. I think the other stories are good, but just good. Not great, great, really high concept stories like episode 1 is. And that's why the story ranks this highest. I find the rest of the story to still be a good watch. Next on the list is the in the news lately, Unearthly Child, the very first story. And this for a similar reason to what we just talked about in the Space Museum. Episode 1 is amazing. 10 out of 10. One of the greatest episodes of television ever made. It is a phenomenal piece. It does such a good job introducing the concepts of the show. Of something being odd about Susan, a very unearthly child, of Ian and Barbara, two of her teachers, being concerned that they don't quite get what's going on with this girl. And then the interesting thing about an unearthly child is most people who watch it are going to go into watching it already knowing the context of the show. Because more than likely, if you're going back and watching an Unearthly Child, you're already a Doctor Who fan. You had picked up on Doctor Who at some other era, at some other point, and you're just going back to watch this first episode because it's the first episode. So you already know the concept of the show, the characters, the Tardis. You already know everything that's happening. So it's hard to approach this as someone who doesn't know anything about Doctor Who. But imagine what it must have been like when this episode originally aired. Because this episode is like an onion. There are layers to it being peeled away. As we, right there with Ian and Barbara, are trying to figure out what's going on. As they're following her. She doesn't go to a house. She goes into a junkyard. Why does she go into a junkyard? What's going on? We're just as puzzled as the teachers. They go in there. She's not there. There's an old police box, but can't be in there, too small. And then there's this old man. Who's he? Obviously, he wants them to go away. He tricks them into going away. But then they come back before he can get in. Well, the old man thinks he's been more clever than he has. And then when they go in, the police box is bigger on the inside. Much bigger. And of course, listening to the Doctor explain everything about the TARDIS and who they are. And then him kidnapping them at the end. Like, that's a pretty high concept story if you don't know what Doctor Who is, which again, most people go into this story already knowing this, with the foreknowledge of this. Now, episodes 2, 3, and 4, again, like the Space Museum, are fine. I enjoy them. Again, Unearthly Child has that reputation, like the Space Museum, of being a really good first story and then not so great. The rest of the story, kind of dull, kind of uninteresting. I disagree. I like the stuff going on with the cavemen. Is it stellar? No. Is it great? No. But it's good. It's better than meh. It's not bad, certainly. It's better than meh. It's good. I enjoy it. They don't reach the heights of the first episode, but it's still an enjoyable episodes 2, 3, and 4. I like them. And of course, you know, that gears everything up for us to meet the Daleks. But still a good story overall. Speaking of the Daleks, that gears everything up for them to meet the Daleks. Next on the list is the Daleks. Now, you guys know the Daleks is one of my least favorite Dalek stories. And its biggest problem, which apparently even the BBC agrees with because they're releasing a cut-down version of it now in color, its biggest problem is it drags. At 7 parts, the Daleks drags. There's so much of it that can be cut out. Enough so to where they're cutting basically 100 minutes of it out in this new version. They're turning it into a 75-minute movie. Like 100 minutes, gone. So apparently, even they think it drags. It plods along. It's a good story. It's a nice introduction to the Daleks. The Daleks are a unique concept. I love their design. I love their voices. I love the look of the Dalek City. I think it's iconic. Personally, I think the story looks great in black and white. I'm curious to see the color version, but I love it in black and white. I think our cast are putting in good performances, even if Susan can irk me at times. But the cliffhanger with Barbara screaming at the end of episode 1 is iconic, and I love it. It's a good story. It's a great story. It's one of the early Doctor Who stories you can steer Doctor Who fans toward if they can make it through 7 episodes. If not, we might have to steer them toward the new cut-down version because it's made specifically for them, which is why they did that. Next on the list is the Keys of Menace. I like the Keys of Menace. It's like a mini version of the Key to Time season. It's almost like a seasonal arc with a bunch of story with a bunch of episodes, much like the Key to Time. Because each episode of the Keys of Marinus is a very different thing. You have the first episode, which sets everything up in the mystery of everything. Then you have the... I'm really having to remember. It's been a while since I've seen it. You have the second episode, which I think is where everything is like, where they're seeing illusions of everything looking grandeur and it's really just junk. You have the episode where they're in the living jungle, basically, and the jungle's trying to get them. You have the episode in the snow, kind of Arctic cold area. You have the episode that's basically a Perry Mason murder mystery where Ian's accused of murder. Then you have the sixth episode, which ties up the end of episode 5 and then loops back to the stuff that's going on in the first episode. So all of the episodes have a very unique feel to them, but they are all very good episodes. It's not like some episodes of Doctor Who, like Greatest Show in the Galaxy, where I have very different opinions of the 4 episodes that make up a story. In this one, even though it's 6 episodes, I like all 6 episodes, even though they vastly differ from each other. I think it tells a cohesive whole story, even if, again, it is just them basically fetching a bunch of keys. And I find all of the episodes are good. I think it kind of breaks up what could have become a monotonous story if everything didn't feel so drastically different. So I really enjoy the Keys of Marinus. I call it the first truly great Doctor Who story, because it is the 5th or 6th story. I think it comes right after Marco Polo. And Marco Polo, of course, is missing, and I've only watched the cut down of it. So I think it might be truly the first just truly great Doctor Who story. Next on the list is the Daleks' invasion of Earth. This is a good one. I love the iconic shots of the Daleks running around London. I think they look really good. I think it's paced well at 6 parts. Could you cut some out of it? Probably, but I think it's paced well. I think our main cast is putting in a good performance. Susan, of course, is getting hurt way more than she should, hurting her ankle per usual. I think our guest cast is doing really good. The guy who plays David is good. The guy who plays Dortmund is good, showing that Doctor Who understood the importance of showing disabled people in a positive light. Once again, spinning off from the Davros controversy, which we have had a lot. I'm recording this in November, right after Children in Need has aired, and right after I've done my 2 videos talking about it. So that's still very fresh on my mind, even though I don't think this video will go out until like January. But Dortmund, of course, is cast and acted really well. I love that he goes out fighting the Daleks. I think the set design looks really good. I love the idea of the Robo-Men. I really like the Robo-Men. They do little touches to show you that just how human they used to be. Like the one guy trying to find his brother, who does find his brother at the end, only to be killed by him. The one Robo-Man who gets knocked out, who has a wedding ring on. Such a little detail, it's easy to miss, but I've noticed it. You see the wedding ring on him, which shows, this man used to have a life that got stripped away from him, very much like the Borg or the Cybermen do. They really are kind of a precursor to the Cybermen in a way, if you think about it. The wonderful cliffhanger of the Dalek coming out of the water is so classic. The fantastic farewell between Susan and the Doctor, with the Doctor giving what could be the most iconic moment of his run. It's a really good story. I really like the Dalek invasion of Earth. Next on the list is The Rescue, which is a great 2-parter, and it fills its time well. It's a great introduction to Vicky. I like Vicky. I always feel like Vicky is what Susan should have been, and it's a great kind of proxy for the Doctor's granddaughter. I love the scenes between the first Doctor and Vicky in this, like when her little dog gets killed and the first Doctor is comforting her. I really love that scene. It's wonderful performances from both of them. I like the villain in it, like Kurakui or whatever he's called. It's a weird name. I absolutely love the villain. Because it is one of those villains like classic Doctor Who where it's obviously a guy in a costume and you're like, all right, it's a guy in a costume. So the little fun they have with that and the way they play with that is perfect. When I actually saw the story the first time and I saw that, 10 out of 10 on that. That was wonderful. I don't want to spoil it, but if you know, you know. I enjoyed the set design. It's just a really good story. And it knows it only needs to be a 2-parter. It's very much a 2-parter that's aware of the fact it only needs to be a two-parter. So it gets a lot of props for that. I absolutely love the rescue. Next on the list is the Abominable Snowmen. I really like this story. I like the Great Intelligence. I feel like the Great Intelligence is done better in Classic Who, in my opinion, where they almost quite literally don't put a face on it. I love the actor who does the Great Intelligence in it, because it's like he's doing two different voices. He's doing one voice for the Great Intelligence and the other voice for the monk he is controlling. And I like just the difference in voices and personalities and how they kind of conflict with each other. I love that. And the voice is just so well done. It's creepy and unnerving, because it is, I think in the original production, it was like episode 4 before you saw his face for the first time. The surviving episode 2 is a great watch. I wish we had more of the story. The animation is good. I don't mind a lot of the liberties they took. I understand why they drew the guest characters to look more of Tibetan descent, because of course the original production did have white actors dressed in Tibetan descent looks, which would be very frowned upon today, and I certainly wouldn't wanted them to have done that in the animation. I do feel like they altered them a little too much, though, adding scars, adding beards, adding glasses where they didn't need to. I do wish they would have made them, while still looking proper Tibetan, closer to their original surviving footage, because it's really difficult. It's very jarring to try to watch this story in animated form with the surviving episode 2 when you're cutting from the animation of episode 1 to episode 2 to the animation of episode 3. It's very, very jarring, because when you're watching the surviving episode 2, you have no idea who's who. No idea. Which is a little bothersome, but it's very obvious that it's intended to be watched fully animated, and that the episode 2 is meant to either be watched with the reconstruction or just watched on its own as an island and not part of with the animation. It's very obvious the animation is meant to be watched just animation, and the animation is good. This is easily the best one that team has put out. They improved even more over Galaxy 4. I very much like the Abominable Snowmen animation. It looks very good. It moves very well. I love the way the snowmen are done very well in it. I love the special effects of it. The black and white version and the color up version of it are both great watches. I don't really have a preference either way over it. They both look really good. And then I enjoy the story. I think it's a really good story. Strong recommend from me. Next on the list is the Crotons. Probably higher than a lot of people would have it, but I love the Crotons. I have such a soft spot for it. This, of course, is the legendary Bob Holmes. And you guys know I love me some Bob Holmes. I think this was Bob's first story, as I recall. Now, the Crotons themselves aren't the greatest villain ever. They look really good from the waist up. Like with the diamond spinning heads and the claws and the chest, they look really good. Now, from the waist down, it's rubbish. With the little skirt and that funny way they hop, absolute rubbish. But on the shots where you've just seen them here, they look great. I love the performances. Troughton is putting in such a good performance here. I love Fraser. I love Wendy. They're all on fire. The guest cast are putting in good performances. Maybe not stellar, but they're still good performances. Love that adorable scene between the Doctor and Zoe when he's trying to use the machine. He's, what's this do? No, come back. No, wait, no, go away. You know the one I'm talking about. I love that scene. I always brag about that scene when I talk about the Crotons. It's my favorite Dr. Zoe moment. It's very much their moment, like the Doctor has with Victoria and Tomb, except for it's much more adorable here, and I absolutely love that. And then the bit when the Croton tries to destroy the TARDIS and it just reappears somewhere else, and he's like, well, that's a terrible place to land. You can tell the captain is not at the harem, can't you? It's a fun story. And it's, once again, a story that knows it only needs to be a 4-parter. As a 6-parter, it would have drugged, but as a 4-parter, it works perfectly. Plus, I also like the cliffhanger where the Doctor looks like he gets buried toward the end. That's a pretty cool cliffhanger. Very underrated story, the Crotons. Next on the list is The Reign of Terror. One of my favorite historicals, possibly my favorite season 1 episode. I enjoy this one a lot. I think Planet 55's animation for episodes 4 and 5 is really good. Again, there's some wonky stuff going on with the cameras, but the actual animation style, I really enjoy. The characters look like the characters, very detailed. That's a big deal for me. I enjoy a lot of what Hartnell's having to do when he's having to disguise himself. I like how he has to barter for his clothes and then later gets the clothes back. I like when he ends up having to do the road work because his big mouth gets him in trouble. And the fact he seems to take joy over hitting the guy over the head with a shovel later. Like, yeah, you got this coming. The stuff going on with Ian and Barbara is good. I like that it's a slice of life, pure historical. I really like pure historicals. Having watched so much of the Hartnell era just in the past couple years, really, a lot of which thanks to y'all sending in DVDs, which I really appreciate. I've really come to love pure historicals, just this kind of historical events are happening, our characters are thrust in it, and they just got to get out of there. Find a way to get themselves out of there. I like that. I want more of that. I would love a return of that. Probably one of the reasons why I like Demons of the Punjab so much from the modern series. It reminds me a lot of a Hartnell pure historical, which I've done a whole video about, actually. This one's really good. One of my favorite historicals. Next is The Web of Fear. This one is always a little overrated for me, and the missing episode 3 is a bit frustrating, just mainly because the animation for it's awful. I prefer the Telesnap Recon. But this is a very atmospheric story. It's very creepy, very spooky. I love the setting in the tunnels. That's really well done, appropriately spooky and creepy. The introduction of the Brigadier is great. Everyone's putting in a performance. I like the guy who plays Staff, the kind of Staff Sergeant character. I really like him in this. I think the Yeti look better in this than they did in Abominable Snowman. A little more scarier with the eyes. Excuse me. I like having Professor Trevor's back. It's great. Jack putting in a great performance here. I really enjoy this one. It gets creepy Doctor Who done right. A little overrated, but still really good. Next on the list is The Mind Robber. I like this one. It's a nice fantasy story. We don't get fantasy, this kind of fantasy in Doctor Who a lot, like very fairy tale fantasy, with the Doctor being taken out of time. And I like how the Dominators links into this one. Episode 1 takes a very minimalist approach, which the whole story does, but episode 1 really does, which works really well. The simplistic minimalist approach works really well for Doctor Who's budget and with the black and white style it's filmed in. Mind Robber is never a story that ever needs to be made in color. It is effective in black and white. I would not want to see it in color. I like it in black and white. I love watching him meet all of the fictional characters. I actually believe all of Bernard's lines as Gulliver in the story are actual lines that are from the book, I believe. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think I'm right, which is very effective. Now, the realization of Medusa and the Minotaur don't work the best in the world, but they're fine for 60s Who. I love how they got around Frasier being sick for one episode. Of course, Frasier got chickenpox while filming. They lucked out that it happened to be while filming this story, so they managed to work it into the plot where a different actor played him for an episode. That actually worked really well and was done very effectively and really fits in with the second Doctor putting the wrong face back on him. That's actually very funny. And of course, a wonderful performance by Troughton as well. I really like The Mind Robber. It's peak Doctor Who. Doctor Who being Doctor Who, and I love that. Next on the list is kind of edging out, just not quite edging into the top 10, is Tomb of the Cybermen. Of course, this is a classic story, sometimes called the best of the 60s Cybermen stories, although I think that's mainly because it's the only complete story from the 60s Cybermen. It is a good one, though. I like the set design for the most part. I enjoy the guest cast. Our main cast is putting in a good performance. The Cybermen design in this one is good, but not good like 10th Planet good. Also, I don't like the cyber voices in this one at all. But I enjoy the plot. It fills out its 4 parts really well. It didn't need to be any longer, but it fills out its 4 parts really well. And it's kind of the one you steer people toward if they want to see the second Doctor, because there are only 7 existing complete 7th Doctor stories. And this one being only a 4-parter, it doesn't really drag. This is a good one to start people on who maybe are just getting into Classic Who's, the Second Doctor, 60s Who, stuff like that. This is a good one to point them towards. It does have some really good moments in it, especially the Doctor's conversation with Victoria about her dad, which is just a phenomenal piece of Doctor Who in general. Next on the list is Planet of the Giants. I enjoyed this one, a very underrated story. I've only watched it once. It needs a rewatch. But I think it's paced well at 3 parts. I do know the original episodes 3 and 4 were edited together to form the episode 3 we got. But because of that, it moves at a really good pace. I like how it takes this kind of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids approach. The actual set design of when they're shrunk down is all done really well. When they're in the grass, when they see the giant ant, the box of matches, when they're in the sink later, it looks really good. They all look like stages on a play. This episode very much feels like a teleplay, which a lot of early Doctor Who was in the Hartnell era. And it's very apparent here, but I tend to like that kind of thing, so that appeals to me. I like that one scene in episode 1 where it kind of turns into a Perry Mason episode where the 2 guys are talking and one kills the other. I enjoy that. This one's just a lot of fun for me. And at 3 parts, it's not overly long. It's a great one to watch if you don't have a lot of time or if you're young and don't have much of an attention span. Number 9 on the list is Evil of the Daleks. I like Evil of the Daleks. David Whittaker knows how to write Dalek stories. I really enjoyed this one. Whether I'm watching it in black and white really depends. I prefer like the first 5 episodes in black and white with the surviving episode 2, of course. But I like the last 2 episodes in color, I think. I think they look really good in color. Something about the color in those last 2 episodes really pops. Next time I watch it, I might do that. You know, black and white animated episodes 1, 3, 4, and 5. Surviving episode 2 in color 6 and 7. I don't know. That's really odd, but I like it. That's just probably my go-to. I think it looks good in black and white and in color. I think both productions look really, really good. The animation itself is really good. Not as good as Macra, but really good. The characters aren't quite as refined as they are in Macra. They don't move quite as well. But it's still one of the best animations. And then the story itself is simply phenomenal. It fills out its 7 parts really well. We get basically three different locations from 1966 to 1866 to being on Skaro, which I really like. I really enjoy this one. Nobody writes the Daleks better than David Whittaker. He has an understanding of the Daleks even more so than Terry Nation, in my opinion. Number 8 on the list is The Ark. And you guys know I love The Ark. It was the very first Doctor story I ever owned. I don't think I have it up here right now, but it's really fun. I love the twist halfway through. I love that there's a twist halfway through, not toward the end, halfway through. And it almost feels like 2 different stories. Like the second half is a sequel story to the first story. You could have actually had a story in between parts 2 and 3. You could have part 1 and 2, another story, and then part 3 and 4 as a sequel. It really works like that. I think the cast has enough to do. I like the little Morlocks or whatever they're called, the meganoids or whatever. I don't remember. I like their design with the little eyeball. I think that's creative. I love the social commentary going on in the episode. I think Hartnell's putting in a good performance. I like the set design. The cliffhanger to episode 2 is absolutely amazing, and I love it. I love the twist there. And I love just how different episodes 3 and 4 are from parts 1 and 2. If you haven't seen it, you really should see it. It's a shining example of the fact that season 3 is actually a really good season of Doctor Who. Number 7 is The Romans. I love The Romans. The Romans is one of those stories, once you realize it is a comedy, and you treat it as a comedy, as it's made to be a comedy, you can have a lot of fun with it. There's a lot of hilarious stuff going on in this. The main cast is putting in good performances. They're hilarious. The guest cast are putting in good performances. I love the guy playing Nero. He's part of the reason I love this story so much. He's just very good at playing that type of Nero. What they're going for with him and that, he plays that perfectly. Just the stuff he does with his facial expressions. Basically playing that 5-year-old in an adult's body who's been spoiled and given everything. It is perfect how he pulls that off. I love the bit when the Doctor's fighting the one guy, and then Victoria comes in and interrupts, and the guy ends up accidentally jumping out the window, and the Doctor's mad about, well, why did you have to interrupt me? I was having a good time. I like to engage in some fisticuffs. I love the fact that Ian and Barbara keep missing the Doctor and Vicky the whole time, just barely missing them. And so when they meet up at the end of the story, it's like they don't believe that each of them was there, or like the Doctor doesn't believe that Ian and Barbara was there. It's really funny. I love the fight Ian has with the other guy when they actually do the staged sword fighting. You can tell William Russell does have fencing training, sword training, because a lot of times those kind of 60s fights aren't really choreographed well, and it kind of shows, and, you know, they're just kind of willing suspension of disbelief, okay. But this one was actually really good when you're actually seeing them fighting for Nero's pleasure or whatever, and it's actually choreographed really well. I made a note of that at the time. I think the sets look really good. I love the part when the Doctor knows what Nero has in store for him, so he's baiting him with it. Yes, I want to give them something they can really sink their teeth into. When he's messing with him, you see Nero. I love the Romans. It's so much fun. There's so much humor in it. It really is Doctor Who doing humor correctly, in my opinion. Next on the list is The Moon Base, one of the best Cybermen stories ever made. First off, the animation for episodes 1 and 3 is phenomenally good. I don't know if there's any other animation where the characters look like the characters, where Troughton looks like Troughton, where Ben looks like Ben, where Polly looks like Polly. Everybody looks very much like they're supposed to. I love their movement. I love what they do with their facial expressions. This could be the best animation we've gotten so far. And it blends in pretty much seamlessly with the live action episodes, especially since you are constantly cutting back and forth between them with animation, live action, animation, live action. It does a really good job of that not being very jarring, because this is when still the animations were made to complement the surviving episodes. So they were made to look as much fitting in like them as possible, pre-Power of the Daleks. And it does that very, very, very well. The actual story I enjoy. It's a bit of a rehash of the 10th Planet, but I think it's better than the 10th Planet. Troughton is on fire. This could be my favorite performance of him as the Doctor. I just love what he's doing here. He has his famous speech about there are some corners of the universe which have made the most terrible things. I love that speech. It's phenomenal here. I love that Polly's the one that figures out how to use the cleaning fluid to weaken them, which could seem a little silly, but so can using gold. So, I think it's cool Polly does that. Jamie's a bit sidelined because he was kind of written into the script late. But it works. It works for him to be sidelined there. I like the Cybermen's plan is really, really good. The guy who's the leader of the moon base, I like him. The human guy, the actor playing him, I really like him a lot as well. The only real issue I have is I don't like the Cybermen design in this one. I don't really get into that Cybermen design, and their voices are awful. I don't like the cyber voices. For me, the Cybermen and how they look and sound is the weakest part of the story. Other than that, it's a really fun story, and I really like it. Moving into the top 5 with a story just edging out the moon base is The Invasion. I love The Invasion. I think this is the best Cybermen story ever made. And we really don't get the Cybermen until about halfway through it with that excellent episode 4 cliffhanger. Now, episodes 1 and 4 are missing, but the animation for them is really good. It holds up well. It complements the surviving footage well. I enjoy this animation. It was the first animation, I believe, actually. And it holds up well today. Everybody's putting in good performances. I like that Jamie gets stuff to do. I love that Zoe gets stuff to do. Patrick, of course, is amazing, as Patrick always is. It's nice to see the Brigadier back, because I do love the Brig. And I especially love the Brigadier with the second Doctor. I feel like they get on really well. So it's nice to see them together again. We get our introduction to Corporal Benton, and I love Benton, so it's good to see him in this. Was it Kenneth Stoney? The guy playing Vaughn, he's great. Vaughn is such a good character in this. He's one of the best human villains I think Doctor Who has ever had. And he just plays him so well. But I like Packard as well. Packard's more the brawn than the brains. But I think the guy playing him is doing a good job. And they make a good duo. And the story never feels padded out to me. Even at 8 parts, it feels like it fills out its runtime well. And then, of course, the iconic scenes of the Cybermen walking around in the city, which has been redone as homage several times in Doctor Who, but it's never been surpassed. Just seeing the Cybermen coming out of the sewers, seeing them walking down those steps in black and white, it's so iconic. It looks so good. It's basically the Cybermen equivalent of the Daleks running around in London in the Dalek invasion of Earth. This is kind of the Cybermen's, I'm losing my train of thought. This is the Cybermen's moment for location shooting. There's probably their most iconic location shoot is running around in this story, and those shots just look gorgeous. It's such a good story. It's such a good story. Number 4 is the Macra Terror, and this is solely down to the animation. I love the Macra Terror's animation. It's definitely the best animation, I'd say, besides the Moon Base, but it, more than any other animation, elevates its source material. This is the one story that if they never find surviving episodes, I am 100% okay with that, because I know the surviving episodes weren't overly well thought of, and it's kind of a B-movie story, and no one ever really talked about the Macra Terror. But since the animation's been released, people talk about the Macra Terror because the animation is so good. The BBC really needs to get Sun and Moon Studios back. To me, this is the gold standard for the animation. It's never been surpassed since it's come out. The fluidity of character motion is unparalleled. The character facial designs, for the most part, is really good. And this one does such a good job of realizing they don't have to match the original episodes one for one, especially in a story that's completely missing. You can take that and do your own thing with it because you're not having to match any surviving episodes. So instead of trying to do it like a B movie from 1950s America, they do their own thing with it. They reimagine it, and the Macra Terror is all the more successful for that. I love rewatching this story. I love the black and white version and the color version. And I do enjoy the recon of it as well. But the black and white version and the color version, which both have very different feels to them. You wouldn't think that, but they do. They hit differently, but I love them both. It's just which one am I in the mood to rewatch, black and white or color at the time. They're both phenomenally good. And then the story I enjoy myself. Again, it's kind of B-movie fare, but I like the story. It works well. Now, the incidental music doesn't always match up with the animation, to be fair, but it's a minor nitpick. It doesn't really throw me off from the story. It's something I'll make a mental note of, but it doesn't bother me. But because the animation is so good, and because they put such a nice budget into it, and they really went all out on it, it makes it such a fun rewatch for me, and makes a story I probably wouldn't have cared much of into a story I love rewatching. There's no other animation that I can say that about, where I'm much happier watching an animated version than I probably would have been watching the original version. This is the only animation I can say that about, and so it deserves to be this high. Number 3 on the list, and the top 3 were really hard to do. Really, really hard to do. But at number 3, I have the War Games. I love the War Games. The War Games is 10 episodes long, and it never feels stretched out to me. I know there's a lot of getting captured, escaping, but it never feels padded to me. I never feel like it's padded out. Like, I never need the War Games to get the Daleks treatment where they colorize it and edit it down like they did the Daleks. The War Games does not need that. I am perfectly fine with the War Games being 10 episodes. It works. I think Troughton is giving it his all in his final story. I like that Jamie and Zoe have stuff to do. I like a lot of the guest cast in this as well. I think they're putting in good performances. And then the cliffhanger to episode 9 is one of my favorite cliffhangers in Doctor Who. And then episode 10 is one of the most essential Doctor Who episodes in the entire show's history. Everyone needs to see episode 10 of the War Games. It's so iconic. The first time we go to Gallifrey, even though it's not named that, the Time Lords have never been betrayed better than they are here. This is what the Time Lords are supposed to be, and I wish they would go back to doing the Time Lords like this, where they are just that powerful, and it shows why the Doctor is in fear of them and wants to stay away from them. I wish we could get back to having Time Lords like that. I really do. I love the War Games. I absolutely love it. I don't go back and watch it all the time just because it's that fine wine story. I have to be in the mood for treating myself, like Genesis of the Daleks. But when I'm in the mood to treat myself, it comes off the shelf. And I can watch all 10 episodes in a day. It's just so good. Number 2 on the list, my favorite Hartnell story, apparently, I didn't know that until I was doing this, but it definitely deserves to be here, is The Time Meddler. I love The Time Meddler. I rewatched this one recently, which was the first time I'd watched the Blu-ray of it, which the restoration of it is fantastic. I had originally watched the DVD release someone had sent me, but it is fantastic. I love The Time Meddler. Part of this is simply down to Peter Buttersworth being so good as the monk. He is so good in that role. I firmly believe he has a good comedic background. And the fact that him and Hartnell go so well off each other. When they have scenes together, they are so good together. Of course, Hartnell is putting in a good performance. Stephen and Vicky are both doing really well. I like the guest cast, especially like the female Viking. She's really good. Oh, she's not a Viking, is she? Whatever she is. The main female lady living there. She's good. I like her. I really enjoy it. I love it. It's kind of the first pseudo-historical. I love the fact that we don't really know what's going on in it. It's very much like an onion. There's layers being peeled away. Why is there a watch there? Why does the monk have binoculars when they're supposed to be in this time? That the episode 3 cliffhanger of them being, the monk has a TARDIS. What a cliffhanger. I love so much going on in The Time Meddler. To me, it's essential Doctor Who. It really is. The first time the Doctor runs into another Time Lord, someone besides him and Susan, it's such a good story. I love the set design. I mean, you'd swear they were on location sometimes. The set design is really good for this story. I cannot praise The Time Meddler enough. It's essential Doctor Who. Everyone should see it. And number 1 on the list is Power of the Daleks, easily my favorite Troughton. It is a testament just how good this story is, considering it's completely animated. And we only have a very little bit of surviving footage, no surviving episodes, but just a little bit of surviving footage. It is a testament to just how amazing a job David Whittaker did with this story that it is held in such high regard. But Power of the Daleks gets the Daleks so right. The manipulative, deceptive, dangerous, but yet highly intelligent nature of the Daleks that so many stories forget or don't get right. This one does. I love Power of the Daleks. The animation is good, especially the special edition. The Daleks themselves look phenomenal. I think the rest of it looks pretty good. Not quite as polished as some of the newer ones we've gotten, but it holds up well. I do enjoy going back. I do always watch the 2020 version, but I think it holds up well. I think Troughton is great here in his first roles. He's trying to figure the character out. I like Ben and Polly in it a lot. I love the fact that Polly is a little more believing than Ben. I like that she has faith as the Doctor. The guest cast is really good. The guy playing Lesterson, my hat's off to him. Because Lesterson is written very well and is performed very well. The actor playing him does such a good job. You can tell just from the voice alone and what little bit of surviving footage there is of him. The female that's also kind of in cahoots to overthrow, I like her a lot. The actress playing her, again, just from what I can get from the voice, I like her. I think she's written well and performed well. And the guy playing Bragan is really good too. I got to mention that. I think it's Bragan is really good. The set design looks good from the animations, which again, they're trying to be very faithful to the original production when they did Power. I love this story. The incidental music for it is so good. It's a perfect storm of everything coming together so well. Easily, I think Power of the Daleks and Modern Who's Dalek are easily the best written Dalek stories of all time. And they're easily my top 2 favorite Dalek stories of all time. And the fact that it can be completely animated and hold that distinction of being one of my 2 favorite Dalek stories and being my favorite story from the 60s is just a testament to how well it's written. I love Power of the Daleks. The best Doctor Who story in the 60s, in my opinion. So I want to know what you think of this list, so comment down below and let me know. Don't forget to click the like button and the subscribe button as well. If you would like to support me on Patreon, there's a link to that down in the description. I want to give a shout out To some of my top-tier patrons, Stephen Crane, Colin Coney, and Finn Perkins, I appreciate their support. As I do the support of all of my patrons, it does make a difference. I have a P.O. box down there as well. If there's anything you'd like to send me to look at and review, a link to my Amazon wish list is also down there, as is a link to my Amazon UK wish list. Most importantly, thank you for watching.